Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first episode of the Eric Meter Show. Today, I'm very honored to have the guest, G. Edward Griffin. He created The Creature from Jekyll Island. He's a best-selling author. He's a freedom fighter, and he's a role model for me too. So I'm very honored to have him here. And one of the main topics that I'd really like to talk to you today about would be the mindset that you have to find truth. Because what I've noticed when people find truth is, you know, there's this mainstream mindset that everyone's kind of like a cog in the wheel, and as soon as that breaks free, I've seen people kind of just go off to the point where they don't believe in anything anymore, and it's kind of like this onion that has infinite layers, infinite turns, and you really have to be good at finding truth. So how do you keep yourself in balance and find truth for what it really is?
It's a very profound question, I think, Eric, because there's so many words that potentially need definition. I mean, we could talk for probably many hours as to what is truth.
Yeah.
And you say, how do you keep your equilibrium? What is equilibrium? I don't know. But I think in general, the impact of what you're asking is my definition of truth and what motivates me to seek it when
Yeah.
maybe nobody else cares in the world other than me. And that's where the interesting part is. I believe in my old age, I'm now 94 years old. I don't feel a day older than 93. But as you get older, you begin to think about these imponderable questions. What is truth? Why am I here? Why does anything even exist? Does time have a beginning? And if it does, what was before time? And all these unanswerable, imponderable questions. Um, and one of them is, what is truth and what motivates you in your life? And you look backwards and you say, well, was it all worth it? Did I do what I was supposed to do? When you're young, you never really think too much about what you're supposed to do in life. You just, what do you want to do? But as you get older, you think, was it worth it? Did I make any difference in my time here on Earth? Is the world any better in any way because of me? Or am I just a consumer and a destroyer on all these things? So that comes with age. And now that I've gone through most of that part of it, I came to the decision long ago, not too long ago, maybe 20 years ago or so, that even though we don't know intellectually why we're here, or even though we may disagree with each other theologically of why we are here, why did God create us, or whatever, however we want to phrase it, um, we all come to the eventual conviction that there must be a reason for it. I mean, whatever it is, we don't know for sure. There has to be a reason for creation, and we're very much a part of it. So therefore, we have to have a reason also. So what the heck was it? And was it just to make a living, or to have fun, or to procreate and procreate and perpetuate the species, or what is it? And I may be taking too long to answer your question, but
No.
to me, it's profound. In seeking an answer to that question 20 or 30 years ago, I was looking back on raising my own children. I had 4 children, and they were great kids, and they were really good kids. But every once in a while, they would do something which was not authorized. Know?
Yep.
And that was my job as a parent to do something about that, because we cannot have too much of this unauthorization, especially if it's contrary to what Mama wants them to do. And so it was my job to discipline and make sure that the future was better than the past. And so the question came up of punishment. How do you punish a little kid that you love? And he didn't do anything really bad, but he's out of line, and you got to. It's your job. Otherwise, you're going to create a monster if you don't, you know, let the kid know that there are certain limits to appropriate behavior and all that. And I kept thinking, you know, if I if I didn't tell those little guys what was right and what was wrong, I couldn't justify punishing them for choosing the wrong thing because I never explained it to them, what was the wrong thing. And I couldn't depend on them to know instinctively as a little kid what's the right and wrong thing. So it was my job to say, well, that was wrong. You shouldn't speak to your mother like that, or whatever it was, And but then I got to think, if I hadn't explained it to them, then how could I punish them for contrary action to what I wanted them to do? So I realized that my first job was to explain what I wanted them to do or not to do, and say, no, this is a warning. Don't do that again. No punishment, just information. But if they continued to repeat the same error, now it was time for Dad to do something about it. Well, it's not corporal punishment or anything where you're going to beat him up and put him in a refrigerator for 3 hours or something. Although you felt like it sometimes. So and I got to thinking, applying that to the real world of my world, what is right and what is wrong. If I wouldn't punish my children for doing something wrong unless I had explained to them that it was wrong, how could God punish humans, adults, or anybody for doing something wrong unless he explained it to them that it was wrong? And so where do we get this information? Do we have to read it in a book? And which book? There are a lot of scriptural books. Different civilizations, different cultures over different eras have different wise books and reverent books, and the truth comes from the books. And then we have the preachers and the priests to explain these things. Why doesn't God explain it to us? Let's get to it. I want to know what's right and wrong. And otherwise, you can't punish me, can you, God? If I do something wrong and you didn't tell me it was wrong, it was going through that kind of an argument. And I struggled with it quite a bit until finally one day the bell rang, and I got this input that came from who knows where. And I said, aha, I get it. Cancel all those arguments, Lord. I got it. And the message was that God does tell us what is right and wrong, but not in words. It's in instinct. We are made with the inbred knowledge of what is right and wrong, and that was given to us as our roadmap, so to speak. Now, we can ignore it, and we can pretend like it doesn't exist, but I believe even the worst criminal or maniac, murderer, horrible person has deep within them the instinct and the capability of understanding what is right and wrong. And you see it across all cultures, all races, all times. When somebody steals something from you that you created, it's yours, and they take it from you, that's wrong. And even the guy that's taking it from you knows it's wrong, but he doesn't care. These things, private property, that's an instinct. That's wrong. Something that belongs to you. You deserve it. You created it. You made it. It's yours. Maybe it was given to you, but then it's still yours. And all these things, and suddenly realized that my instinct was already built into me what is right and wrong. And even I could see it in my little kids. They knew it. They knew it was right and wrong, but they didn't know that they knew it. Anyway, so now back to your question. To me, I'm driven by instincts. There's the big things in my life, I don't really understand why I'm doing them, but I know that I have to do them because I just feel it in my bones. And there's nothing bigger, I think, in human experience than freedom. Freedom to act, freedom to do the right thing if you want to. And of course, that includes freedom not to do the right thing. But you can't be rewarded for doing the right thing if you have no choice. If you're forced to do the right thing, if you're whipped if you don't, and that sort of thing, or you're forced in some way. It's the idea of freedom of choice has got to be part of this equation, and also listening to your own instincts, to your own heart, and just knowing, and then saying, without it saying anything or thinking, just, okay, I got to do this. It's the right thing to do, and I'm going to do it. So that's how I've been operating my life for probably the last half of it, the main half of it, is that I don't really know. I couldn't tell you any more than I just said right now, that I do what I have to do because I'm compelled to do it. And if I don't do it, I feel terrible about it. So my work has always been driven by that. Every book I've written, every speech I've given, every dissertation or rambling I've ever gone through is usually because I feel that it's important to express something that I consider to be of value to somebody else. Maybe passing on some wisdom or some condition of life, freedom. What is more important than freedom? I mean, freedom and health are everything. If you're not free, if you're a slave, what good is health? And if you're
Yep.
healthy, um, what good is that if you're a slave? So to me, those two things go together. You have to pay attention to health issues and to freedom issues. And my whole life is devoted to those two issues. Um, I shouldn't say my whole life. My family and my loved ones and a lot of other things get in there, but it's all the bedrock is your health and your freedom. So what motivates me is that I don't know. It just is part of my internal structure, and it's the light bulb comes on and says go that way, not that way, and it's satisfying. It's gratifying, and when the day comes for me to cross the Rainbow Bridge, I'll be able to look back at the other side and say, well, I did the best I could, and I did some good. And so, yeah, I did leave the world a little bit better, maybe, than when I walked into it.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I really love that description, and I think one of the things that you've highlighted with then is truth is not necessarily something that you make. It is the current below everything, and it comes to us. And I've felt this way a lot of the time, where the way I operate is I try to listen for my inspirations, and instead of forcing things, I try to see myself more as a conduit for what I'm inspired to do. And I think that's really what truth comes down to, is listening to those instincts, because like you said, it goes beyond words. It's this knowingness that we have deep inside of ourselves. But then along that vein, I guess getting to the point where you can view it from a perspective kind of detached from the situation, how do you balance the emotional aspect of it, I guess? Because one of the things I see with people, or one of the things I see with truth, is it can be very brutal at times. When people expose corruption, that can really change a worldview. Or if they see the world isn't what they've seen, I mean, it can happen on a mass scale, where they see there's organized corruption, organized crime, whatever. Or it could be a personal injustice, and they're seeing the truth, but then it kind of black pills them, where they get they turn inward, they get depressed.
Mhm.
So how do you find that balance on an emotional level to keep yourself as a conduit for truth?
That's another good one. It's a highly introspective issue because I'm sure the way I do it is different than other people. But one of the things that has helped me throughout my whole life with overcoming despair and anger and resentment against the bad things that happen to you is humor. I've always been I love jokes, even bad. In fact, I think I like bad jokes more better
Me too.
than good jokes because my wife tells me all my jokes are bad. So, but anyway, that's a joke, by the way. And so,
I know.
uh, uh, I found early on that if you can't relax and laugh, even at tragedy sometimes, not in the face of tragedy, but looking back on it, say, oh, well, it's a good thing that happened. It kept me out of the bars or something. You can joke about it. And when you start to laugh, something happens to you. You sort of get back to your equilibrium. And I highly recommend it because although other people don't understand it, you're going through some hard times and you're laughing about it. Um, they don't realize that that's therapy. It is for me anyway. I think so. Keeping a sense of humor as much as possible is you can make that a habit. Actually, you have to work on it perhaps in the beginning, but after you get into the rhythm of having a good time and joking about even bad things, it takes the edge off. And
Yep.
then there's something deeper than that too. You start to think about it, and you realize that with it, life is bigger than you think, and you get too wrapped up on the little things and worrying about what you don't have. I remember this is another thing, like something happened to me a long time ago, about 20 or 30 years ago. I decided I would keep a little notebook of all of the things I've learned about life when I was starting to learn about things or thought I was learning about life. And the first thing I wrote, I never forget it. It's actually kind of profound. I impressed myself with it. I want to make this sound like um, what's the Chinese philosopher? Um,
Sun Tzu, The Art of War, or
no, that's the Art of War. Yeah, I mean he's a warrior, but uh, Confucius. Confucius.
oh,
So I wrote this as Confucius say, but that was
hmm
actually my statement. So I wrote it as Griffin say. Griffin say that. Let's see if I get this straight now. It's been a long time since I've tried to phrase it. Griffin say, if you think about the good things that you have instead of the good things you don't have, you will know contentment.
wow, yeah, that's great.
And there you have it. And every day I look around me and I can see all the good things I've got. And I'm one of the luckiest people in the world. I've got a great family. I've got material things. I've got friends. I've got uh, accomplishments. I've got everything you could possibly ask for, and even fairly good health considering my age and everything. I mean, I'm the luckiest guy in the world, but I can make myself miserable if I look around and I see something that, oh man, I wish I had that, or wow, look at that. I wish I had a yacht, or whatever. So that's my answer to your question. Think about the good things in life and that you have instead of the good things you don't have. And you realize how lucky you really are and laugh along the way. And you can survive some pretty serious hardships.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's totally spot on. Recently, Glenn and I we do these gratitude sessions sometimes with our audience at Privacy Academy, and what we said was, one of the backbones of truth is maintaining a pure heart. And I think what you're talking about, being lighthearted and being grateful is extremely important because basically you can find what you're looking for. The mindset you have is what you're going to find. So if you do have that negative mindset, you will find things that are true, but they do hurt you. So I love what you're saying. I think keeping a lighthearted approach, being grateful, is very important. But let me ask, like, how does that translate into how you communicate with yourself? Because I'm a writer. I write for Privacy Academy. I'm working on a book. I haven't said that publicly yet, but I know I've told you about that. And I understand that words are very powerful, and they shape my personal view. And as a creator, someone who writes, I understand that the way I talk to myself or the way that I write will affect everyone who reads it too. So, how do you balance, I guess, your mindset in sense of the words that you choose and the way that you think, in your day to day life? Is that something you think a lot about, or is it kind of back to what you're saying about just being a natural thing?
Well, I think it's a little bit of both, actually. It's a natural thing, but as a writer, uh, as you now know, you have to focus on your writing. It it doesn't just come tumbling out and
Yep.
finished form. It comes out like a mess in many cases, and you have to unscramble it and get rid of all the gunk and rewrite it and polish it and then tear it all up and throw it away and start over again. And maybe the third try is a little bit better. So as a writer, you have to take professional pride or respect for your work. Otherwise, you're not going to be a writer very long and so forth. So there's a difference when we speak about my writing, that is, it's something, again, I'm very fortunate. I mentioned a moment ago, how lucky can you be? I'm fortunate that I am able to write. It comes fairly easy to me. I didn't know that at first. This is another story. I'll give you the short version. But I I was trained as a young kid as a child actor. Can you believe anything worse than
Wow.
that? I was a child actor, radio actor in Detroit, Michigan, where I was raised, and I just happened to stumble into some training programs for that the school system was offering for kids to learn about radio broadcasting, and I thought that was cool. So I hung out with that class, and it started off with a lot of kids enrolled for it. I mean, it was a room full of kids on the first day, and then the next weekend there was about half a room full. The next weekend, it was a third, and then it wound up down to about four of us out of that whole group of a couple hundred kids that just stuck with it. And the first thing you know, we were being called upon by the local radio stations, especially the networks, ABC, CBS, and NBC, and had stations in Detroit, and we were being called upon to act in radio programs. I remember, you probably know, the Lone Ranger came out of Detroit, and the Hermit's Cave, and the Ford Theater, and a lot of other programs. So I got involved as a bratty kid as an actor. Well, I thought I was going to be an actor when I came out of that womb, and that was going to be my life. And I knew I couldn't write. I had tried to write a couple of times, and I thought I was pretty lousy, and I was right. But I thought, well, I can't write, but I can act. Who cares about writing? Writing is for sissies. Acting is for real men. All of that nonsense. So when it came time to get on with my career, right in the middle of it, in the early stages, I came down with an illness, and I was diagnosed by two neurologists as having multiple sclerosis. Well, I didn't know then what multiple sclerosis was, but I found out that it was considered to be uncurable and progressively fatal and very horrible in the destruction of the patient. Gradually, the neurological system goes kaput, and it's a bad way to go. So I was really bummed out by that, I can tell you.
Of
And
course, yeah.
I was at a state where I was paralyzed. I couldn't move very much. I was barely able to talk. And make a long story short, uh, the important part is, of course, the doctors were wrong. I
Wow.
did not have multiple sclerosis. I had something else which looked very much like it, but I did gradually recover from it. But during that stage when I thought I was on my way out, I had a wife, and by this time I had a couple of kids to support. Had three of them at that stage, or I had to go back and count. Maybe I had all four, but how am I going to support a wife and four kids when I'm lying in my bed as a paralyzed cripple? This is this was the harder thing to face than the fact that I was going to die young. And and then I got a phone call from a publisher that called me, and he said, Ed, he didn't know I was sick. He said, I hear you've been giving speeches on the United Nations and that they're very well received. I said, well, thank you, sir. That's true. I've been giving speeches. And he said, we would like to publish a book on the United Nations, a critical review of the UN, according to what we're hearing you're talking about in your speeches. Could you write a book for us? Well, of course, I can't write. My instinct was going to say, no, I don't write. But I'm looking around, and I have no money, and my family still has to eat. And I found myself saying, oh, no problem. I can write a book. And I committed to it. Well, that was the beginning of a big part of my life. I took a couple of months to put together the documentation for all the things that I had learned about the UN in my research for the speeches. I was on the road giving addresses, public addresses on the dangers of the United Nations. And so I had to compile all that and find the documentation to reference the footnotes of where I get the information about all of this. And the day finally came. Well, my banker boxes were full of notes. It was time to write the book. Well, you've all seen movies, old-time movies, where the writer, the hero or the actor in the movie is going to write a book or something, and he can't write. He has writer's cramp or block, like I did. And the movies are, he types something and pulls the paper out of the typewriter and throws it on the floor, and then he puts another piece of paper and he starts over, rips it out. That's no good. This was me in real life. I could not get the first sentence onto a piece of paper. The trouble is I didn't have a typewriter. I was handwriting in pencil. So I
Wow.
would rip the papers up. I had papers all over the floor. And I got so disgusted with myself. I said, I can't write. What am I going to do? I'm committed. And I thought, darn it, just write something. I did Mersey-dotes, Dovesy-dotes, write, up the hill, down the hill, something, write it. And I started to scribble stuff in disgust. And all of a sudden, I wrote a sentence out, and I looked at it, and I was shocked. I thought, well, that even made sense. And I'll never forget the sentence. As a matter of fact, you'll find it in the beginning of my first book, which was The Fearful Master, a second look at the United Nations. And it was part of the introduction. And the sentence went something like this: the United Nations is a huge topic. It's like a giant globe of glass, very smooth and polished, but so large that you cannot get your arms around it to hold it up. Where do you start with something that gigantic and smooth and unreachable? And then I said, it's like you have to move a mountain. Well, how can you move a mountain? But the only way is to dig. And so the first spade, and I said in the book, is Katanga. And of course, that was the first chapter of my book. It was the province of Katanga in the Congo, which fell victim to the so-called peacekeeping forces of the United Nations. They destroyed a perfectly beautiful, peaceful province. And when all the provinces around it had been taken over by communist rebels, and they were slaughtering people, and the UN sent troops there to put down the violence, but they didn't send the troops where the violence was. They sent the troops where the violence was not, which was Katanga. And they overthrew that government, and then it became communist as well. And so that was the first spade, supposedly, in moving the mountain. And I looked at that and said, that was fun. I could do something with that. And the next sentence came a lot easier than the first one. And the first thing, I found myself on page 7, and I'm scribbling away and having a heck of a good time. And I thought, my God, I can write. And ever since then, I've enjoyed writing. And I think there's a lesson there deeper than it appears to be. Not just, you found out that you can do something you thought you couldn't do. But in my life, I think that what I consider to be major catastrophe, a roadblock to my progress, the end of the line, so to speak, like a terminal illness, I've had other roadblocks of similar stature and horrible things happen to me. In every case, in retrospect, they turned out to be the best things that ever happened to me, because they forced me to take a different path than the one I was on. And had I stayed on the original path, it would have been probably miserable. But in every case, looking back, I was forced to learn that I could write and enjoyed it. And that changed my life. Had I not been diagnosed incorrectly as multiple sclerosis, I would never have known that.
Wow. That's really amazing. I feel the same way with my life too, with, roadblocks as being a door. So a lot of the times maybe someone listening is going through hard times. It can be a transition period, but it kind of goes back to what we are saying earlier about there's this truth beyond everything, and I believe that everything happens for a reason. And I think what it comes down to, like I said earlier about how do you not, get depressed, is you have to have some form of faith. And like you said, it's worked out exactly how it should have for you. And I think a big testament to that is because you are so good at listening to that natural inspiration that you have.
Well, I think I'm getting good at it, but in that day I was not. I would never have figured it out by myself. So if you want to be spiritual about the whole thing, you might say, well, God intervened and he turned you around against your will. And that's exactly how it seems. I would never have done that voluntarily.
Yep.
So you have to give credit where credit is due. And in most cases, it's not you.
Yep.
It's beyond you.
Absolutely. So I've gotten kind of deep with a lot of my questions. This will be a kind of deep question, but it's a very surface level question. So, what does freedom look like to you?
Well, okay. Again, there are a couple of ways to look at that. What does freedom look like to me? I mean, how do I feel about it? What's my appraisal of it? My evaluation of it? That's one thing. And then there's the other way of looking at it. Well, what does it legally mean? In a society. Well, the two really shouldn't be too much different, but they usually are. Most people think freedom is merely not being in jail. To me, freedom is a lot deeper than that. It means living in a society or a culture where it is the general agreed upon and approved ideology that men and women are supposed to be free to do anything they want to do, provided they don't interfere with the freedom of other people to do anything they want to do. Now, that to me is the definition of freedom. And if people would follow that and think about it, I think we'd be living in that utopia that doesn't exist. But that, nevertheless, to me, that is what freedom means: is being free, and to be free to do whatever you want to, except to take away the liberty of others to be free to do whatever they want to do, requires that you live in a system where the government or the state understands that rule, which means there are no governments on this earth today that abide by that rule. None of them.
Yep.
They're all dug into the question of how can we limit the freedom of this person or that group so as to benefit that person or that group, or to compensate for that group and punish that group and take from him and give to him. How do we get in the middle of all of this so that we are the masters of society? Everybody depends on us for everything. That's how governments evolve. They become crime syndicates because they can. Yep. We give them power to do anything in the name of helping us. We don't realize that there are crooks that are gravitated by that magnet, and they can hardly wait to get into government so they can start stealing from us and kidding from us and telling us that it's for our own good when we know better, and so forth. So I jumped the rail there. I know what freedom is, as I defined it, is the freedom to do whatever you want to do so long as you don't interfere with the freedom of others to do the same. But that is never, except for one example that I can think of in the world, ever been drafted into a constitution or a bill of laden, not laden, but laws. And that was the American experiment. Yep. In the American Revolution. And it didn't last very long. We started out that way. But today, we are not that at all. Today, we are a democracy. And we are a democratic dictatorship. In other words, the people elect their dictators. Yep. And the dictators have no limits against what they can do because they say it's for the greater good of the greater number. Now, that's not how it started. It started off as a constitutional republic, which basically, it said Government can do anything it wants to do except to prevent others from doing what they want to do. So my definition and my feeling toward freedom is exactly that way. And it's a legal concept or a social concept, but it's also a feeling, the feeling of freedom, the feeling of guilt that you don't have, the feeling of permission, the feeling of doing good, whether others agree with you or not. You can do what you want to do so long as you don't hurt somebody else. I shouldn't say hurt them, because sometimes if somebody's trying to kill you, you're entitled to hurt them.
Yep.
But that's
Absolutely.
yeah, but that's the thing. As long as you don't interfere with somebody else having the same freedom, and the guy that's trying to kill you is trying to interfere with your freedom to do what you want to do. So that's where the line is drawn. So
Yep.
it's two levels you can look at it, but it's the same thing. It's like two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. And where do you think the biggest turning points happened where we fell away from that? I mean, I think looking at my generation, I feel like so many. I mean, it's been going on for a long time, but it seems like so many people have not seen real hardship, and they don't, hold people accountable. It's kind of like this boiled frog where they slowly pass bills, they slowly pass laws, and it totally changes over time. But people aren't standing up. People aren't saying no in the ways that they should. So just to sum it up, what do you think has caused this change to happen in America?
Dancing with the Stars. No, that's a joke. But it's a serious joke. Dancing with the Stars is a very popular television show. It has no meaning of great consequence, except look at all these sharp-looking people dancing around, having a lot of fun, and how do they do that? And, oh, that's a celebrity, and so forth. And so I would say Dancing with the Stars, also football, also baseball, also going to the movies. In other words, it's entertainment. It's once people don't have to fight for their freedom, once all the old people who did fight for their freedom are dead, and the next generation comes along, and they remember the stories of their parents when they had to fight for their freedom, but then they grow old and they die, and the next generation comes along, and they don't even hear the stories anymore. The concept of the value of freedom fades into nothingness. Who cares? We've got it. We've always had it. Nobody had to fight for it or die for it. And freedom, we're all free. We live in the free country of America, we said. But we already had abandoned that long, long ago when I was
Yep.
born. But I didn't know that. I was still quoting all the statements of the founding fathers and not realizing that those statements were no longer incorporated into our laws, or no longer honored, I should say. So Dancing with the Stars is the answer. We got away from founding principles, and to the point that we don't even remember what they were. Most
Yep.
Americans could not define freedom today. I said before, they just think it means being not in jail. They have
Yep.
no idea that there's a lot more to it than that. So I guess that is my answer to your question. I think that freedom is perhaps one of the most important conditions of life that you could possibly imagine, at least to humans who understand the abstract concept of freedom. I doubt if animals, lower kingdom animals, have this concept, although maybe at some primitive level they don't enjoy being in a cage. They want out of the
Yep.
cage. You can see perhaps that's the highest level of their concept of freedom, is not being in jail. But for humans, it's much more than that.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it kind of makes me think about, when you bring up the founding fathers, I think one of the reasons why America was given this opportunity was because geography, quite honestly. Like you look at I'm in Hungary right now, my girlfriend is Hungarian. Hungary is geographically in a really bad spot. It's been, conquered over and over and over. And I think when the founding fathers came to America, yes, they fought for their independence, but they had this huge landmass where they could kind of contain themselves and not worry about getting conquered. And the reason I bring this up is I think on top of the Dancing with the Stars, I think another issue is with the internet, we've kind of stepped away from local society. We've become hermits. Everything happens on a federal level. People feel, so removed from what happens in their society, and they feel like, what are they going to do about it? And so that's why, Glenn and I are very passionate about local. That's one of our big moves, and I know you do that. You're building that with your Freedom campuses. So would you mind maybe touching on how important you think local is, Freedom campuses, and how people can, reactivate their local communities?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. And I'm trying to think of the connection to what we've talked about so far. Actually, the topic of the campuses for Red Pill University is what we're talking about, or any other movement to organize people to accomplish a mission. But in this case, it's the organization called the Red Pill University with these campuses in all the local communities. And what you're trying to do, local. That has an indirect connection to the question of freedom. It's not so direct in that it really doesn't affect your freedom. But if you're trying to build a movement that can recapture the political system so that you can correct it and move it back again to freedom, if you want to make a political change in the system, you need to do more than just complain about it. You have to get into the battle, and the battle is politics. The battle is controlling Congress and the Senate, and also city levels and the state levels. The battle is to recapture control of the power centers of society, which is more than just politics, but it includes the school system and the police and the army and everything. All these power centers of society today have been taken over by people who are collectivists. They believe that they should rule society for the greater good of the greater number. They figure that most people are too stupid to know what's good for them, so that they now can be the rulers and feel good about it because they're really doing it for those poor folks that are too stupid to know how to control their own lives. They don't know how to think. We have to teach them how to think. They don't know how to act. We have to force them to act correctly. They don't know how to distribute their money. We have to take it from them and do it for them, make it right. Because we're good guys and we're smarter than they. That's the whole mentality behind collectivism. And we're going to do it for your own good. So it becomes that quickly. And if you want to break that, you have to break it the same way they built it, to gradually recapture control of these power centers, which means you've got to quit just talking about the problem, but become active out there in the streets, and not just in the streets, but in the organizations. Run for office, for gosh sake. I don't care what it is. Get those collectivists out of position and replace them with individualists who believe in individual liberty and who will have no axe to grind except freedom. And that's never been done before. It's always had to go through a war of some kind where everybody gets slaughtered, and you have to destroy the old system with cannons and bayonets and things like that. It may come to that, but if we want it to come in peacefully, it can't be peacefully, but with less total violence and destruction than it always has in the past, we've got to take control of the political system. And that means now we have a reason for building these organizations other than just survival. I mean, I think all too often people say, oh yeah, we got to start growing our own food and maybe putting things away for, extra clothing and all that sort of a. But why are they doing this? Well, so we can survive. It's so discouraging to me. I've been delivering this message in one way or another now for a long, long time. And I don't think I have ever heard, ever, even once, heard someone ask me, out of all the questions that have been asked of me, I've never had the question asked, what can we do to win? It's always, what can we do to survive? They have no vision of winning, no vision of changing anything. It's just hoping to escape somehow. It won't work, folks. You cannot escape it. You've got to destroy it. You've got to overcome it. You've got to win this battle. You cannot hide. So that's why I want to make that distinction between the value of going local. It's not just to survive. If that's it, good. That's good for survival, but how long are you going to survive? 2 years? 3 years? What about your kids? How long are they going to survive? If the system remains the way it is and keeps getting worse and worse, there's no turning around. So that's why I hesitated so long, because I didn't want to get into all this negativism, because
No,
it's
it's
that
fine.
serious. But that's the answer to the question. We have to think in terms of winning and not just surviving. And in that
I
case, the value of local activity and organization is not just to survive with food and clothing and shelter, but to survive by recapturing control of the political system.
Absolutely. No, I think that that's totally in line with everything Glenn and I say, and I'll take it a step further. Even along those lines, there's the prepper type who say, I want to go out in the woods, I want to have my own food, I want to be self sustainable. That way, I can bunker down and survive all of it. I just told you earlier, I live in Hungary. My girlfriend, her grandfather was a farmer. He had a huge stockpile of food. He had his animals. He could live there forever. And what do you think happened when the Soviets came? They took all of his food. They took all of the farmland. They sent him to a gulag, and he died there. And so the truth is, if there is tyranny, you can't hide from it.
No.
Especially nowadays. I mean, with what we talk about with Privacy Academy, you're not going to be able to hide from it. You have to be empowered. You have to take local action. It's not just about complaining on Twitter. That's not enough. It's about real life meetings. And that's what we're working hard to set up. Glenn and I don't know if Glenn told you, but we're creating rejectdigitalid.org. So we're passing legislation. We're also trying to preserve cash forever. And we've got a lot of other stuff on top of that. But what are some of the main topics that you want to pass locally to preserve freedom?
One of the most important things I think you can do to get started on this is to find out what it is we're talking about when we say we're in a battle between collectivism and individualism. It's really the ideological foundation of our entire movement. And many people, especially young people, have never heard about this. I mean, even when I was going through school, I never heard about it. It was already scrubbed from the textbooks. But a generation or two prior to mine, the words collectivism and individualism were everywhere. Everybody used those words in common discussion, and they knew what they meant. And it's the only two words that mean anything politically. So I won't go into trouble to explain all that to you, because that would take an hour. But if you want to know what that mystery is, we have a free booklet I drafted up on just that topic. It's called The Chasm, and that represents the great divide between individualism and collectivism. And all political ideologies have to fall into one of those two categories, by the way. Communism, fascism, Nazism, socialism, all these other isms are just variants of collectivism. They're all the same in principle. They have a different flag and different minor things, but the essential elements of the ideology are all the same. So it's important to know that. Once you have your mind back on top of something that's definable as defines a real difference between what you believe in, not just the good guys versus the bad guys, but what they do with their power and what limitations they have or should have. That's the beginning of our return home. Because if we don't agree on that, we'll always be stuck in the world of good guys versus bad guys. And they'll always wind up bad guys, of course, then, because you give them political power, and that'll even corrupt good guys to start with. So if you want a free download of that, go to the internet and just type in Chasm, CHASM, .realityzone, one word, .com. So it's chasm.realityzone.com. And you'll see our booklet there, and it's free. You can download it, you can print it, you can read it, you can throw it away if you wish. But I think you'll see the world differently, the political world quite differently, when you recapture knowledge of those two words. Cash is extremely important. I don't think most people realize how important cash really is. As long as cash exists, it's going to be much more difficult to enslave people because they can barter money, so to speak, and do a lot of things and become independent. But if if depending totally on the government or the banks to tell you how much you can spend and how much money is in your bank account, and if you don't agree with them, suddenly you have zero and you can't pay the rent, you got to sleep out in the street. That's the end. So
Yeah.
one of our pet projects will be cash. There's no question about that, and we have others. I think the vaccine issue is very, very important. Everybody thinks that, oh, good, we beat we got make America healthy again. Look at all these strides that are being made against the vaccines, where we're getting more and more information now how bad they are. Yeah, but we still have the vaccines, and they're still requiring them, and they're still forcing them on little children. We
Yeah.
have not even begun to beat that battle. So that's another one of ours. So we figured 2 or 3 at a time is good, more than enough. And of course, our campuses are free to do whatever they wish. They can choose their own local issues, which would be very good, provided the only control we want, because we're anti-control freaks, okay? So we don't want people controlling us, and in order for that to happen, we have to agree not to control them when we have the power. That's the key. Everybody thinks, well,
Yep.
give me the power and I'll make everything straight. I
Yeah.
don't like those guys because they got all the power. Give me the power and I will make it good. No, that
Yep.
doesn't work that way because people are corruptible and all the rest. So anyway, uh, we we have to just build these movements from the ground up, and 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 so people could pick a local. All right, I'll give you an example. I moved to I had a little retreat. In fact, I still have it, middle California, and it's a beautiful place. It's out in the country and everything. I've always wanted a place in the country, and when I got there, I found out that there was a movement to create a new water commission. Why do we have a water commission? Well, there's a lot of farmland out there, and a lot of people have their own wells, even on the outskirts of town, and so forth. The slogan was, um, "Keep Sacramento out of our water." We want local control over our water, and it sounded like it would be kind of a theme that you and I would be all in favor of. That's why they chose the theme. It was totally deceptive. The purpose was just the opposite. What they wanted is a new water board. The water was now controlled by the County Board of Supervisors, which is elected by the people. But the water board was going to be appointed, and they had their own members selected for the water board. And those guys were all corporate guys. They were beholden to some of the big corporations who were trying to lock down water in that area. It has one of the largest water basins in the world. And they were going to drain that out and sell it off and then rent the empty space to Sacramento. It was a big Ponzi scheme, and they were going to take the water rights away from people in the name of a new water commission to protect your local rights, they said. Well, I saw that. Oh, my God. So I got involved in a very small movement. We started with 3 of us. And we said, let's fight this thing. Now, we're up against a big budget. I mean, it was a multi-million-dollar budget. They were running full-page ads in the local newspaper on, local control over your water. And all the good-thinking people, oh, yeah, that's good. They were behind it. So we started putting out little pamphlets, little single-sheet pamphlets, one sheet of paper folded once. And we got these 3 people working for us. We worked together. We were putting them out at gas stations and on the counters in grocery stores, little town. And we got people organized to call in on the radio every day and expose the fact that this was a corrupt operation. And all of a sudden, people were volunteering. We went up with an organization which probably had that 15% we're talking about, the real active people. I always guess we had 30 or 40 people. We're putting out pamphlets, standing on the street corners, handing them out. when the cars came to a stoplight, and we were getting the word out. I think our budget was total $3,000. Came election time, we whipped the pants off of them. Three
Nice.
people with 30 people whipped the pants off of a multi-million-dollar campaign, and it was destined to go to fruition all the way if nobody intervened, because everybody thought it was local control when instead it was just the opposite. But we put
Yep.
out pamphlets that had headlines like, warning, shark attack in the county. Shark attack inland. What do you mean shark attack? Well, these are sharks. These guys are financial sharks. Things like
That's
that.
good.
So we got attention, and we just did a little work. Okay, this is the kind of organization I'm talking about. Boots on the ground, not just talkers, and not just donors. Donors is nice, but people that do things. And we have to work on the city council and get those people out of there. Anyway, you get the idea. This is what we're trying to build.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think one of the great things that your story highlights is you don't need majority to make change. And
No.
it's important because people, you look at what's going on nowadays with privacy. You see Google or Apple or, the government, the biggest corporations, and everything's connected all over the world. It's globally coordinated. And that's one of those things that black pills people. But really, they're building a house of cards, and we have the power. We just have to take the steps. I always say that fear is the greatest tool of power seekers because it keeps you in action, and you just need to take action and do it. So yeah, it's fantastic. I really appreciate how much of a man of action that you are, and everything that you've done for freedom. It's really fantastic. And like I said, it's so awesome that you've been on the show. So just wrapping up, do you have any last words? Is there anything you want to shout out where people can find you or support your missions?
Well, thanks for that. I always forget to bring up those things. My small team here always balls me out. Griffin, you didn't give them our website again. Yeah. Well, okay, what can I do? I guess the simplest thing, we have a lot of websites, all right? The one we're talking about is the Red Pill Expo, which we put on one or two of those a year. Next one is probably going to be in June or May, but probably in June coming up. And we have a news report that goes out 3 times a week. We have the Red Pill University website. We've got the bookstore website, which is realityzone.com, all these websites. But I think the simplest thing, if you want to find out what kind of mischief we're involved in and want to consider becoming one of the mischief makers with us, why, the good place to begin would be the newsletter, which is needtoknow.news. You can sign up for it free. It comes 3 times a week. If you don't like it, you can just cancel. But you will like it, I think. If you listened to me this long on this podcast, and you will like our website because that's on steroids too. So sign up, and then everything we do in terms of all those other areas of activity, Red Pill University, campuses, expos, all those things you'll be notified, and probably all through the Red Pill Center itself. And so that's it. Just remember, it's needtoknow.news. And up in the upper right-hand corner, there's a place to give us your name, your email, and brother, you're in. That's it.
I hope you enjoyed that interview as much as I did. If you want to see another interview, click on that box or a link in the description. And also, if you don't mind, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.